Okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone who is tuning in or joining us. That this is our end of year webinar. It's Monday, the 22nd of December, and I'm one of the hosts, Dr. Jonathan Andrews from TED's Health, and I'm joined by Dr. Johnny Bloomfield. Today, we're going to be talking and focusing on the topic of burnout and how we both feel individuals can prevent burnout and strategies they can take into the new year to tackle burnout. I'll be coming at things from a medical perspective, and I will just give a brief intro about myself before handing over to Johnny for an intro on himself. So, as the medical director at TED's Health, we are a UK-focused digital men's health clinic. We are ultimately focused on the general health of men, with a keen interest in hormonal health, looking at diagnosing low testosterone and offering treatment where appropriate. We also tackle erectile dysfunction as well. And with these two conditions, we typically find that patients will come to us having exhausted other options. And because of the nature of it being a little bit taboo, they'll often come to us only after trying many other things and often sometimes feeling a little bit embarrassed that they are dealing with this. But in reality, they may have been having a great deal of other health and mental health issues ongoing for quite a period of time. And looking at examples that I typically see in my NHS clinical practice, my background's emergency medicine, but I spend a fair bit of time in urgent care at least once or twice a week in London. And typically I'm seeing people coming to use our services because they are experiencing issues which have manifested and been not dealt with. Simple health issues that have been ignored, lifestyle interventions that should have perhaps been heeded but have not been, resulting in chronic disease. And typically for men, they're disproportionately affected. So I tend to see a segment of the population, but who suffer with burnout, and it manifests in different ways. But my NHS practice is not limited to men only. So I do see obviously a full spectrum, and we do see that increasingly my focus is from age 16 upwards. But burnout is something that can affect anyone really, and it's irrespective of your status, your gender, your age, your background. Yes, there are many factors, your social status that may impact it or maybe affect certain groups differently. But I think it's something that globally we're becoming only more aware of. And I think for people who are working either with patients, so clinicians, or clients, so coaches, I think we're becoming more aware of that finally, because people are becoming more comfortable to speak about it. So that's a short intro by myself. I'm going to hand over now to Johnny, and yes, people will, I'm sure, be joining in. And so welcome to everyone who is just tuning in. We're still going through our intros, but over to you, Johnny. It'd be great to hear a little bit about yourself, and obviously some background to today's discussion.
Thank you, Johnny. Maybe for ease, I'll call me JB maybe for this so that not the two Johnnies. We had the two Ronnies normally at Christmas, but today you've got the two Johnnies. So yeah, it's brilliant to be here. I'm really excited to have this platform to talk about this topic. Johnny and I have been getting to know each other over the last month, and this was a topic that we've picked because we feel it's highly relevant for modern day men and women, of course, but in particular we both have a passion for men's health. So I'm seeing it a lot in the work that I do, which I'll be talking about during today's webinar. But I think it's also a highly prevalent time of year to be talking about this. Whenever Johnny just mentioned there that burnout happens to all of us at any time, but it's certainly from a statistics point of view, it's certainly showing up, or it's being presented a lot higher in the month of December than it is in any other month of the year. There's a Finnish company called Firstbeat. They offer a lot of diagnostic tools in the area of stress and recovery, and certainly looking into their huge database of hundreds of thousands of measurements, particularly in executive men and women, they're showing up that stress is being measured physiologically and presenting in greater volumes in the month of December than it is in any other month of the year. And as a consequence of that, rest and recovery and sleep quality is also reduced in this month, despite a greater demand for it as well. So to give everyone tuning in, listening, either live or in this recording, to give you a bit of a background of who I am, if we can kind of just make sure mics are muted, so we're no echo. Brilliant. So my name is Dr. Johnny Bloomfield. Unlike Dr. Andrews, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD, PhD doctor, and my background has been in sports science. So I began my career working as a strength and conditioning coach, and then quickly went into the area of sports physiology. And I'm based over in Northern Ireland in Belfast. And I worked, my first job was with Ulster Rugby, and then I moved into the Sports Institute of Northern Ireland, working with lots of Olympic programs and Commonwealth Games athletes. And then I had an opportunity to join England Rugby. So I was part of Martin Johnson's backroom team, and had a phenomenal experience supporting a lot of very big men for the demands of International Rugby Union. Following that, I went into the golf consultancy for a little while, and also worked a number of projects across the Premier League until about 2015, when my family came along. So I made a decision to sort of pivot my career and focus on executive health and well-being. So I've been working in the field of corporate health and well-being for the last 10 years, and I've developed a number of skills in psychology, coaching and psychology, to complement my skills in physiology. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm also going to personally let everyone know that burnout has affected me at least 3 times in my life. I can think of when I was a 21-year-old, I suffered burnout from overtraining. My sport, I played field hockey, and I had a particular year where I completely burnt myself out physically, and couldn't actually get out of a chair at one point because of exhaustion. I then got burnt out in a work capacity, and it was actually working for England Rugby. I remember I was looking after basically 2 teams, because we have a Saturday team and a midweek team. 2 teams on tour in Australia, and at the end of a very demanding 4-week period, on the very last day, I remember leaving £70,000 worth of sports science equipment in a hotel lift in Australia, and I walked out and left that in a lift. And luckily or unluckily, my line manager was the next person who entered that lift and saw that I left that equipment. But I think it kind of spoke to me that I was exhausted, that I couldn't really function very well. And then my final one is probably a little bit more recent. I've been self-employed for 13 years, and in recent times it's been very demanding with COVID and Brexit and cost of living crisis and market forces changing quite rapidly, and having to kind of reinvent myself a number of times has been relentless and exhausting. So there's kind of 3 personal occasions where I've experienced burnout. Yes, I'm hopefully talking from both a position of knowledge and experience for this webinar today.
Great. I think that's the key thing, actually. I think is kind of actually being able to recognize it, firstly in yourself, but also in others. So I think to be able to recognize anything in somebody else, especially something, I mean, we can get into what our definition of burnout is, but in a second. But unlike in a medical setting where there might be biomarkers and tests and investigations and gold standards and evidence where that would enable me to make a diagnosis, burnout is not necessarily, or for want of a better word, we treat it as a global term for many things. But actually, I was thinking myself earlier, reflecting, planning for this, about when I have been burnt out. And it's funny because there possibly is some stigma associated with it, right? So we have to be vulnerable. So I was kind of saying, well, was I really burnt out then, or was I not? Have I been burnt out or not? I think the truthful answer is I have. I haven't quantified it quite like you have, but at least once. I echo a lot of the things that you say as well. I mean, by nature of a lot of my work being, well, the clinical work is shift-based, and that's quite high pressure, high stakes, especially in an emergency department. It puts a lot of strain mentally and physically on the body, and even emotionally as well. And then obviously a lot of the work I do, like TEDS and other work, is remote, asynchronous, but sometimes never stops. You never really switch off from that. So there's a lot of juggling in the context of working online, but still working with people. We're all still adapting to newer ways of working and advances in technology and AI and existential threats on the market itself. Mm-hmm. And then seeing those people, again, as a doctor, but seeing people coming to me again with those stresses and putting that on to myself and others, obviously that increases the stress load and therefore the likelihood for burnout. But if I was being honest, I think it's sometimes tough to admit, and I think it's important that we're having this discussion and dialogue in 2025 and beyond. And I think we can't do enough to try and hopefully normalize it, because there is, I think, maybe an angle we can in a second. There is an argument that especially with men and in men's health, that people don't like to speak about it or admit it. There's stigma associated with it, and men are typically wanting to be stoic. You know, we're seen as the breadwinners, caregiver capacity, etc. So to be able to admit burnout might seem like a failure. Mm-hmm. And I think more and more so in the performance setting. So whether that's sports, whether that's any type of industry where people are expected to perform or lead. And I think even in the professional industries as well, it's the same in companies as well. So I guess I'd love to hear from your perspective, Johnny. So as a coach and somebody who's worked in a number of different settings with a range of individuals, companies, teams, etc., how does burnout look like in your clients? Maybe you can talk about some of those different profiles as well. How do you recognize it, or how do you get others to recognize it and therefore seek help?
Great question. So I particularly, the vast majority of my clientele is executive men who are in their 40s or in their 50s, and usually they request that, you know, if we were to engage in some work, the request is I have no energy. So it probably presents itself most likely in terms of that. So that might be physical, but it's also like mental sharpness, brain fog, being able to focus, concentrate, have some sort of level of endurance for a day of demanding work. And they're also maybe don't see it or recognize it, but they're actually burnt out, really exhausted emotionally, because they're maybe a business owner or they're leading people, and they've had to give out so much of themselves for so long that eventually it's ultimately taken its toll. The other thing we should also make everyone aware of here, when we talk about burnout, we're automatically drawn to thinking about work, and it's the workplace and it's the people in work, but that's not the only factor here at all. I have clients who have challenging home lives, or going through challenges at home, on top of a very demanding work life. So let's not restrict our thinking to simply the workplace, or I should say the people within work that causes burnout. It's everything contributes it. Also, it's not necessarily huge things that cause it. It may be the kind of the death by paper cuts scenario, whereby there's just so many small things chip away at you, that eventually it leaves you drained and exhausted, and sometimes, I mean, I particularly think of the burnout cases that I've mentioned, and I would have definitely leaned into a lot of the it's not about admitting it. It's this. I'm not good at saying I have a weakness or I need help, or it was very much stoicism, very much like, I'm a man, I should be able to do this, I can do this, I can keep, I can cope, until suddenly just the bubble kind of goes pop. So there's recognizing it can be difficult when you are in it. It normally takes for you to get to that moment where something terrible has to happen before you realize, I was burnt out to get for that to happen. I was burnt out to leave all that expensive equipment, and just my brain just stopped working. The keep going, resilient, tough man attitude that society beats into us, it masks us recognizing the signs and the symptoms. So perhaps on this call, it's not about putting the onus on you as the individual to spot your own signs of burnout. Maybe we all need to just get a lot better at spotting the signs of burnout in other people, in our family members, in our work colleagues, in our teammates. Look out for those signs and symptoms before you end up knocking Johnny's door saying, medically I've got an issue, or emotionally I need counseling because of a problem. And that's another final factor of this. Everyone's got a history, everyone's got baggage. I've dealt with CEOs this year who have run out of energy now, but actually when we started to explore why, it all began 30, 35, 40 years ago in their life, when they had a childhood trauma, or something in their childhood or in their upbringing actually shaped a particular way of thinking that has led to 20, 30 years of ingrained belief over certain factors, which ultimately leads them down a path and making choices like lifestyle choices, or unhelpful stress management coping mechanisms that have led to 20, 30 years of accumulative strain that's led to a major issue, which has ended up you knocking Dr. Johnny's door here saying, what's wrong with me? And he telling you, well, you're burnt out.
For want of a better word, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I don't typically I tend to encounter patients who are coming with physical symptoms, not always, and the mental might be masked again because of stigma and other reasons. Sometimes they are coming with a mental health crisis, but again, I think the key thing, if you're flipping the question around, is from my perspective as a doctor or clinician seeing patients, again in the NHS, it's acute, it's frontline. We're seeing people who are at that breaking point of crisis. So that is, physical illness, and something usually quite significant. Heart disease is the number one preventable disease for men and women, but it disproportionately affects men. And I think that men, for reasons that we have discussed, are more prone to it because they are missing the earlier signs and opportunities to make some changes where they could actually prevent or delay disease really taking its foothold and leading to adverse events, MIs and the like. So I'm curious though whether where it all comes from. I think you've touched on some really good points, and I think I'll just try and echo some of those, because I don't think I've got much more to add from burnout, in the sense that I see the end result, and realistically people probably come to see you, Johnny, one way or another, hopefully at an earlier stage. Again, maybe that's already too late by the time they come to you. As you say, everyone's got a history. I think in 2025, 2026, I think we are better at understanding it, kind of at an institution level. So as you said, you've worked with elite teams. I think it's well recognized now in the sporting world that there should be more focus on this. There probably still isn't enough because there's huge pressures involved, and I think arguably managers and coaches are still optimizing for medals and results, and this is and I think the same in the corporate setting as well. It seems like it is a tick box. It's very topical. Burnout is prevalent, especially since COVID, because we saw the downstream effects, the knock-on impact on productivity, on absenteeism, and therefore, broadly speaking, impacting even the country and the economy, right? It affects the GDP and stuff like that. So obviously, it makes sense that people should shift some focus towards this and invest in coaches and programs and even clinicians as well. We're seeing clinicians coming under employers in some cases. Have a GP in your bank or in an office. It exists. It's still probably not as accessible as we would like it to be. Again, it still disproportionately affects those who can afford either their companies or the people. So it's not something that is equally accessible to everyone in society. But I think, as we spoke, burnout could affect anybody, and affects all factions of society. I'm interested in what drives this. I mean, it's just kind of an open question. It'd be lovely to hear other people's thoughts as well beyond Johnny and myself. But is this societal driven? Is this kind of governments and countries trying to do the best and generate the most, result in kind of the most growth and try and maximize productivity out of people? Is there, again, just cultural norms that this is what we are supposed to do and just keep going? Because otherwise the end result is people will take more time off, and self-care, too much time in self-care means they're not being productive. Do you have an opinion on where the drivers are, or do you feel it's possibly more complicated and it's kind of a multitude of those factors?
My hunch, okay, my hunch is we're conditioned, societal conditioning. We've talked about masculinity there a little bit, and there's the term toxic masculinity. Man up and tough it out, and we feel rather demasculinized or very weak and vulnerable if we aren't able to keep up with the demands and pressures of our workload and our societal expectations and social norms. So you do feel, particularly as a man, you feel very inadequate, inequipped, and weak if you're not keeping up and tolerating the demands. So I think we are socially conditioned to keep the stiff upper lip and say nothing and carry on. But thankfully, in the last decade, the stigma around mental health has started get broken down, and hopefully this will be the stigma around burnout might also be a part of the way on that journey. After all, mental exhaustion or being mentally drained is a third of the component of complete burnout. So hopefully the conversation around it will actually become a lot more easy to have and a lot more open. Where, you know, if you think about where I've come, my journey through, you know, to 20 years ago, people like me, I mean, I was the first sports science at England Rugby, so there was I think football was probably one of the sports that embraced sports science first, and many more have gone on to do that. But our key job is to monitor the load, okay, so the physiological load of the players, but also to monitor the response to that load. So that might be through a range of biomarkers, so staying physiological, but also looking at their subjective wellness factors. So, you know, how is that showing in your sleep, and how are you feeling? You know, one of the best questions to ask: are you tired? Are you feeling tired? And hopefully getting an honest answer. Usually, when you ask that question to an athlete, they will tell you no, because again, the same sort of rules apply. If they were to show that they were tired, that's a sign of weakness. It might have a consequence on how their manager perceives them or selects them going forward. So so often we would try and stay on the harder numbers, and, you know, physical performance, physiological response. But if you think nowadays, every professional club has a team of me behind those, and the data that's being collected and the technology that's being utilized is so much more advanced and sophisticated, and it's highly accepted in the industry of, like, this is how we, and for sake of another argument and relevance for today, this is how we avoid burnout in athletes. So we don't overtrain them, overcook them, overplay them, and because an athlete who is incredibly high earning, if they're sidelined for even a short number of weeks, that's a huge cost to the business without that asset available. So so definitely in the sports industry, focusing on athletes, it's highly accepted now. Now let's convert that a little bit more into mainstream. Actually, before I do that, we think, well, where there is a resistance is the backroom team, the knowledge. You know, nobody's monitoring and trying to prevent burnout in the physios and the fitness coaches and the analytics staff,
the doctors and the healthcare workers and all of that, right?
And the head coach, in the you know, all those key factors. In fact, there is when you talk to, well, very, very obviously, very publicly, you know, when you talk to when you hear about the lifestyle of a Premier League manager, their phone is never off. They are constantly working, and you know, 365 days a year, there is very little downtime. So burnout prevalence is huge in the likes of backroom staff and coaching staff. But let's think about you and me and our roles. So we don't have the public pressures that these guys do, but we do now have more and more sophisticated wearables, so we can get more data on our physical and physiological responses. So we can utilize some self-reporting and quantifying ourselves regarding how we are reacting and responding to our environment. We can utilize that knowledge to learn about different things that affect our lifestyle. Many people do. So the positive impacts of physical activity, how to optimize our sleep, how to manage our stresses. These are great insights that we all have. Most of us have good access to these days. So I think it's moving that direction where we're learning a lot more, but we're probably 20 years behind where we were with monitoring athletes. But it's the gap is closing, and it's closing much faster than ever before, because how good our wearables are now, and how much access we have to knowledge, and how we can use AI tools to question things and start to learn a lot faster than ever before. So what might be really interesting is when workplaces maybe start thinking along these lines of, like, these employees are our assets. If we have a certain proportion of employees unavailable for work because of sickness absence or stress leave or something, what's that cost to the business? And could we follow that kind of sports science philosophy or model to say, how do we minimize this loss of productivity? And also, how do we improve the benefits of the well-being of our staff? So we get a kind of a double whammy there, where we save money from having reduced absence, and we increase our revenue potential because of greater productivity. And we're also recruiting and retaining our top talent and saving costs in our staff churn. So there's so many benefits to doing that. But I think we have got, when it comes all the way back to the beginning of the question, it's societal conditioning. So at the minute, we all keep a stiff upper lip and we say nothing, and we just bury our heads and carry on until we pop and end up having a medical crisis or a relationship crisis, or the end product of burnout reveals itself. Whereas we need to think. I mean, for me, the clients that come to me are high performers who see it, who see, like, if I want to continue to have sustainable high performance, then I have to be sustainable. There's only so much energy, resource, capacity that I have, so I need to squeeze that out, get the most out of it. But I also have to lean in and respect how I recover, and can I optimize my recovery so that I can have high performance every day, not high performance for a certain period of days until I pop.
It's really great listening to you kind of talk us through that, your own experiences, from working in elite sport and obviously into what you do now, because a lot of this is not completely new to me, and I've also worked medically looking after sportsmen and elite professionals in different industries from a health perspective, and some of it has been preventative, but some of it not. And what's quite interesting is that obviously in certain circles, so I guess where you say where there's high pressure, where there's potentially huge money involved, certain industries have been focused on this for quite some time. I mean, if you look at aviation, for example,
or life and death,
or aerospace and kind of space medicine and certain fields, there's a lot of the stakes involved are so big, and the costs of getting it wrong, or absence, or illness, or that person not being there because they are an asset, they then could turn into a liability. So there is a different focus, and it's very, if you like, it's maybe transactional, I guess, ultimately. But there is, as you see, not even a double, maybe triple or many whammies, right? There's lots of positives when it all works together, but if it doesn't work together, it can be a negative. And yet we still seem to find that many workplaces and corporates changing a little bit, but forget corporate, just think of everyday people who are working in say retail and in or freelancing or contractors, and don't have these support systems in big companies. They're ultimately left on their own. So burnout is essentially, if you're your own boss, if you're a freelance plumber, or you are
I'm freelance. That happened to me.
You're a freelancer as well,
yeah.
And even some of the contracting work I do as well, even though it's work from home as a doctor, but I am my own boss. So it's on me to recognize when I might be ill, when I might not be able to attend something, when I'm out of capacity, when I've got a family emergency I need to deal with, and obviously be able to communicate and act accordingly. So the onus is on the individual, and there comes a point where if you stack too many things, that in itself can become a source of burnout. So I'm curious. So we touched on kind of wearables, we talked tech, and and the data that can be aggregated from that, interrogated now with use of AI. We've touched on this, and this is probably too much to go into right now. But broadly speaking, what are JB's top wearables? What kind of data points do you, as a executive coach, like to capture? And we're talking broadly, not specific to sports or CEOs or anyone, any individual. If a new client was to come to you, any gender as well, man or woman, what are the key things that you would ask them to track? Because one of the things I hear a lot is with Kickback is that actually tech enables so much data, continual data monitoring, that you can lead to information overload, which can be a source of anxiety for certain individuals.
Yes.
So too much of a good thing. Where do you strike the balance? What's your approach with using tech and wearables?
Yeah, so I've aligned myself to one particular brand in particular, and have done some development work that all my clients are sort of at liberty to utilize this one brand, and then I'm able to extract all the health information from it. So at least everything I look at, I know its source. It's all come from technically the same source, maybe different models of devices, but at least I know what I'm looking at, and I kind of can track it longitudinally per person, but also I can look comparatively across other people of similar stages of life and so on.
So it's standardized, isn't it?
It's just standardized. So kind of my kind of go to there is, you know, pick a horse and keep riding it. Then and one of the key things for me is just pick something with a really good battery life, so that you don't have to do a lot of device management. You want to try and make this this data collection to be very low friction. So low friction and high quality, of course. I suppose one of the things I maybe mentioned it very early, very back in the beginning. A company in Finland called Firstbeat, they released some of their data. They're a company I've utilized for 15 odd years. I think I started using their technology at England Rugby, both to track the physiological loads in the gym. So when we were doing off-feet conditioning in particular, we were measuring using heart rate and something called heart rate variability to measure their physiological output, and then obviously the heart rate variability to follow up the response of that output. So we would have measured heart rate variability, say the morning after a tough day training, and get a gauge of a sense of who's ready for today's training, who's fully recovered, and who needs a bit more, who needs to have a reduced training load this day, and so on. That's just bread and butter for sports scientists these days. So heart rate variability was a bit of an exclusive a kit in our tool bag for many years, but now it's probably one of the go-to features with all the modern day wearables. So people maybe different companies maybe call it something different, but it's usually something like stress and strain or load or something like that, and it's just a great window into a person's physiology and a sense of looking at how stressed the system is, how the system is experiencing stress, how it's showing up, and how well it's resting and recovering from that stress. So really it's looking at our autonomic nervous system and the two branches being sympathetic and parasympathetic, or fight and flight, rest and digest, maybe more common terms. But another way of I would commonly explain these in my talks would be, you've got your accelerator pedal in your car and you've got your brake pedal. So that's just like your nervous system. So if you've got your foot slammed on the accelerator pedal and the engine's roaring and it's all day and it's all night, then that's going to put an awful lot of wear and tear on your engine, on your tires, on your brakes, on your suspension, and all sorts of things. The harder you press that, the harder and more commonly you press your accelerator. Same with your brakes. If you're just slamming your brakes every time as well, it's not a good thing either. So we want to have be really skillful driver, where we're just using enough accelerators at the right time, and using the brake pads, so that we minimize the cost in our annual servicing of our vehicles. We don't have to replace the tires as fast. We don't have to wear the brake pads out quite as dramatically. So it's a great analogy for our bodies and the wear and tear, and they maybe link that to something like how fast we necessarily age. So that, going back to wearables and like a go-to feature on them, if you're not already looking at it or studying it or getting familiar with it, maybe 2026 is the year to really look carefully at HRV, heart rate variability, or however else it might be, whatever other terminology they might be using, so stress or strain or load or something like that, and really take interest, just observe it. And I would caution, I loved how you've just mentioned that there. Don't let your wearable lead your life. It's just a kind of a window telling you what's going on. I never, when I'm talking to my clients and even myself, I normally say the data says, or the device tells me that. I never treat it as fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's the same thing even for clinicians as well. We see blood results or lab results, diagnostics, but in context with speaking with the patient, and many times even at TED my team will know, even though I've seen bloods, I may need to speak to the patient or ask one of my team to speak with them, reach out, ask some questions, screen, probe a little bit more before we can make an action plan. You can't just operate in silo, because sometimes these things are in tandem. The metrics are synonymous with the ongoing status, but sometimes they are not. Sometimes they're at odds, or sometimes they're a lagging indicator as well. Digging into heart rate variability, HRV, I think that's quite topical, and I think it's becoming more and more well recognized. As you say, people are seeing them on iWatches and wearables and other devices, so it's becoming more and more synonymous with being a metric to measure. For those who may be listening and have heard of it but haven't really monitored it, or are kind of coming back to it after a period of time, I'm going to be a bit more specific. I love granularity, and there is so much nuance, but I think if I was to pin you down and say, what is your one thing, what is one activity or protocol or advice that you would give to someone who could try and improve their HRV or their stress score, what would you say? And we're coming at it from an 80-20, so if you were to focus 80% of your effort on this one thing, rather than doing 6 things which you then give up because it's impossible to do 6 things from scratch, what would that one habit be?
You've pinned me. So, well, I'm gonna duck this question so badly.
That's okay.
Big rocks. So we talk and certainly in terms of athletes improvement, we all race to the 1%ers. Take this supplement, do this protocol, wear this, do that. They mean nothing if you're not taking care of your big rocks. And the big rocks are hydration, nutrition, good, minimally processed whole food diet, physical activity, daylight, getting enough activity outdoors, and then sleep. It's another massive rock. And then finally, your kind of your stress management, and you're avoiding harmful substances. So what have I just listed? The 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. I think I just have. Accidentally have just realized that. So it's I missed. We might as well throw it in, social connection. So if we're not like spending time, energy, even money into getting those areas right. Remember, none of us, well, maybe there might be some, but there's probably none of us who are listening to this are trying to compete in the Olympic Games or win a professional sports contract. We're all just trying to get through life, have a high quality life with reduced risk of disease and dysfunction for as long as we possibly can, and then hopefully extend our lifespan as far beyond life expectancy as we possibly can, and just live out as many quality years disease-free as possible. So if we were taking, the advice coming back to, there's not one thing that's just a silver bullet that's gonna, if you do this, I'll guarantee you all of that.
Yeah.
But I think you need to go, right, where those are 6 evidence-based pillars that will make enormous difference to our health outcomes and to the quality of our lives and our enjoyment on this planet. And then if you want to say, if I want to come on and answer your question, is to each person who listens to this is like, well, what one would you want to start with to improve? So pick one of the 6. I would always encourage people, if you were lost, to know where to begin. Physical activity has cascading benefits. If you move more outdoors, your eating will improve, your sleep will improve, your mental health will improve, your risk of disease will improve. It is the biggest and easiest lever to pull in terms of making a difference to the quality of your life and your lifespan and your health span.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think, if you look at longevity markers, not that we're using that term necessarily, but that's where the focus is. And you look at VO2 max and a lot of other things that come from exercise as well, in terms of muscle quality as well. And again, looking at aging well, gracefully, but again, reducing risks when one is older and more frail. Falls may lead to fractures, etc. So that stability, that muscle function, that cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory fitness, and therefore everything downstream of that, metabolic fitness, etc., glycemic control, etc., all types of hormonal regulation, kind of what we see a lot at TED's Health. It all is interconnected, and as you say, these things are a little bit like a flywheel, because with good exercise, therefore, generally speaking, you're getting better utilization of fuels, and therefore you are hopefully encouraging better eating habits, which will then hopefully promote better kind of nutrition, and kind of focus on intakes, outtakes, etc. But again, all of that is caveating that, assuming someone's baseline is okay. If someone's been sleep deprived and not slept in 3 days, them going and doing a sprint is probably the worst thing they could be doing.
So perhaps before we even start talking about muscle mass and VO2 max, just getting moving, just leaving your front door and actually taking a 5-minute stroll. Get the snowball, because it's Christmas time. Hopefully we'll see some snow. Just get the snowball and just sort of get it into your hands, and then we start to roll it to make the snowman. So if all your capacity is a 10-minute walk once a day, and that's your start point, then that is going to lead to enormous benefits for someone. And who knows where that snowball will take you? Maybe it will lead to more. We talk about exercise, but let's say physical activity leading into more formalized exercise that what the majority of people would classify as exercise, and that can lead to better cardiorespiratory fitness, better strength, and all those longevity benefits that you were mentioning there. But if you really are if you really are beginning somewhere, that's almost what I would recommend you do. Just simply getting out and connecting. Time in nature, it's a massive evidence-based practice for coping with burnout. Just getting outside, listening to the birds, seeing the trees, feeling the wind, feel that temperature change on your face as well. It's all these enormous benefits. Doing that 10-minute walk with a person who's open to talking to you, listening to you, and hearing about what's burning you out is another massive way of making a difference.
Yeah, it's amazing actually when you say it like that, because actually that last point about just getting outdoors, doing some activity for 10 minutes. Sorry, that's my dog and probably the place for the third time today. But these are all things that people can do for free. It doesn't cost money. There's no expensive wearable to order and wait 3 weeks for, or to plug in charge, or ensure the screen doesn't scratch, or check the warranty. There's none of that. Actually, these are things that are just available naturally. And I think actually that some of the simplest things are things that are commonly available.
Yes, I love that. I think keeping things as simple as possible, leaning in on anything that's free and accessible, and mindset here is critical. It's where people get it wrong, particularly this time of year, as we start to get into New Year and we all set these resolutions. We all chase perfectionism, and it leads to failure, and we do it every year. Whereas if we change our mindset to talk about progress, so if my start point is a 10-minute walk outside, then we're in 52 more weeks. Where could that progress to? Who knows what your progress is, but your mindset is, okay, today's plan's a 10-minute walk. Okay, next week I'm gonna maybe get up to 15. And in who knows, in a month's time I might be doing nearly an hour. Who knows? And it's that excitement of where's this journey going to take me? But if I can if I can lean into this is the process, and I'm going to I'm going to do it consistently, and I'm going to show myself self-compassion about the times where it's tougher than others, or maybe there's the day that I miss it, that it doesn't happen. I'm not going to berate myself. I'm going to forgive myself, and I'm going to go again tomorrow. And it's that leaning into that mindset of let's make progress over a longer period of time, as opposed to let's either get it right or fail. And once I've failed, that's it, over for another year. So really encouraging everyone listening in, but if this is prior to your traditional annual New Year's resolutions, what decisions you make, think it with take a different mental approach to it this year, and go, you know what, who knows over 12 months where I could be, what difference I could make to myself if I start small and roll that snowball and let it grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, totally. And I think just I'm sure yourself and many probably listening in are familiar with Atomic Habits and James Clear's work, but I was listening to something, so I read that book a few years back. Probably it was recommended, I'm sure, in the New Year's sales, and obviously I got a copy in kind of audiobook and listened to it in one go. But interestingly, some of those habits I've kept, whether intentionally or not, and others you forget. Okay, and I think I was re-listening to a clip maybe a week ago, and actually one of the things James was saying, who's the author, was essentially just start even simpler. Like for many people maybe listening, the barriers that we've said, getting out for 10 minutes, that's too much actually. So maybe it's as simple as even just putting on the clothes and just going outside, and there's no, and then doing that for a week. And once you've done that and put the reps in, that becomes, it solidifies it. Or literally just going to the gym. And some people say, well, I've only got less than an hour now. 57 minutes is no point going. And actually, frankly, there's probably some value in even going for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of dedicated exercise versus having not done anything for 4 weeks is better than nothing, isn't it? So always. I think we got to personalize it to the individual. Not everyone is going to be able to exercise for three hours per week, or have a clear 3 dedicated hours. I have weeks where I don't feel like I can do anything for 4 days straight, and then
me too.
You got to make it work. And I think, as you say, something is better than nothing. consistency is key. But I think the hardest thing, and I think maybe I didn't get to that bit recently, but once we do fall off the bandwagon, it's going to happen. Maybe it's this time in January, the 22nd of January, or maybe it's 9 months into 2026, and we say we'll push it off till next year. I think that's where a lot of people, maybe even listening now, they say, well, okay, let's not worry about it for 2025. This is next year's problem. How do we remove that friction point or make that barrier easier to overcome?
So I am going to continue your line of thought there around James Clear's Atomic Habits. So when I'm coaching people, I kind of borrow a lot from him. So I love the 1 minute intention that you've just described. So rather than contemplating a 10-minute activity, just focus on the 1 minute activity that will lead to the 10-minute activity. So, put your shoes on or put your coat on, or that's all you got to do. All you got to do is put your coat on. And then once you've got your coat on, you might as well open the front door and then take a step outside, So I love that 1 minute intentions, and you keep it as simple as you possibly can. So that's a great way of shaping a habit. The other thing to keep that habit moving and to prevent it from failing after setbacks, because there will inevitably be setbacks. It's all about creating identity. So James Clear also talks about the person that you want to become, and this is something I work with my clients. Is and I got feedback from one person this week, and she told me that there was one line that seems to have stuck in her head, and I probably said it to her about 2 or 3 months ago, and she revealed to me this week that this has made all the difference to her, and it was, I want you to think you're not that girl anymore.
Okay.
And she says it's made a massive change to her choices. It's like, and she used that language, I used to, when I was feeling low or emotionally drained, I used to, reach for those snacks, or I used to, pour myself a glass of wine, or, I used to do an unhealthy thing. But now she's thinking, I'm not that girl anymore. I don't make that choice anymore. And she has a new vision of her future, of her health, which is another component that we worked on. We set a wellness vision. We identify health outcomes and goals, not just objective goals like let's reduce our cholesterol, let's reduce our waist circumference. Those are objective measurements that can be very helpful, but I also lean very heavily on the subjective outcomes as well. How will you feel? How do you want to feel after so long? And what type of person feels that way? And that's what I focus on. I want you to become that type of person who always feels that. And then you ask, well, what are the habits and behaviors and thinking patterns and actions that are performed by that type of person? It's another way of getting maybe a high achiever to become a high performer, and back in the world of sport, it's like, what would your role model, what does Lionel Messi do? Can you mimic as many behaviors as you can of a person that you ultimately admire? And when you're in that moment of, do I do this or do I do that, you ask yourself, what would he do or what would she do? And justify that choice by going, because I'm not that person anymore. And behavior change is all about identity change. That's where it's deep and meaningful and lastful. Whereas, again, coming back to New Year's resolutions, everything is based on willpower and discipline. And I suppose that links very nicely back to us talking about men and stiff upper lip and toughing it out. Is surely, if you want to change, you've got to have enough willpower and enough discipline to make it happen, and that's it. And if you can't do it, then you're weak. And we all fail, because willpower and discipline is not enough doesn't have enough power or fuel to last the distance. It's great for a week or a couple of weeks, but it fast runs out, and particularly runs out once we are challenged by our daily lives, and something comes along, and we're really pressed to do something, or we're out of routine is another one. So instead, you lean into, I'm going to change the type of person that I am. I'm going to become more of a certain individual that, and I'm going to mimic the choices that they make 90% of the time, 80% of the time, and 20% of the time I can relax and still make the wrong choice without berating myself or feeling guilt or remorse because I've chosen something that I wouldn't normally do, but used to do a lot in the past. So yeah, that's where deep rooted behavior change will come from. It's identity shift, not discipline and willpower.
Yeah, I think that's you touched on a few really interesting points, and I think that lots of things I've individually thought about those things, as in modeling behaviors and kind of expectations, and changing that kind of perspective as well, right? So not thinking in the eye of the person who has got this disease, this condition, this diagnosis, this limiting factor, but thinking of what could I do if I wasn't, thinking from slightly a different perspective, and ultimately removing those, or trying to remove those limiting beliefs, right? Essentially, so there's that the psyche, the psychological component. We've spoken about the physiological as well, and tracking that to metrics and wearables. I think one final thing just to maybe add into all of that is, and again, as a doctor, trying to hopefully influence positive changes and reframe management strategies for illness, disease, dysfunction into kind of positive behaviors. I have to look at things that also fundamentally people will enjoy. Will you enjoy it? Will you be happy? Because
absolutely,
all well and good saying I want to be able to run like Usain Bolt, but why? Is that where you derive happiness from, or fulfillment from? And if that is your goal, to be a sprinter, okay, but if it's not actually, and it's more you're chasing a physique or something else, that attainment is, well, are you going to fall short from that? Because one of the things I often hear, and I think it would be a counter argument, is people would say, well, I can't do what Messi does, or someone, because he's rich or she's rich. They have access to teams, people, physios, etc., nutrition. Everyone's taking care of that. I'm a single childminder with other caregiver responsibilities, and I've got to look after others and work and earn money, and so I can't do this. So it turns into what, again, limiting beliefs, some of which obviously are very challenging and many don't overcome. So I'm curious as to how you might frame that to individuals who have the excuses, whether valid or not.
Well, everyone is someone they admire. Think of like, okay, so we give an example of a global icon, but within your own sphere of, I mean, it might be within your family even, but somebody you really admire, and you go, yeah, that's the types of behaviors that they would do. Someone you can directly relate to and respect, and even speak to, and say, how do you manage to do X or stay so fit or healthy, or what's your strategies, not your secrets, but what strategies do you put in place to help you get to live a healthier lifestyle? So absolutely. But I'm also a big part of the wellness vision and setting goals. Why is huge, because that's ultimately where the intrinsic motivation comes from. We have an exercise which is borrowed from lean manufacturing called the 5 whys. I mean, many people have heard of it. So you literally just ask, you want to get to the core of the onion.
Yeah.
So somebody will say, I want to do this, and then you go, okay, why? And then why is that important? And why would you want to do that? And and you know, getting 5 whys to get to the core of the real truth behind what is motivating someone to make a change. And once you have that, you know, once you get the diagnosis of really the true why behind why they want to put effort, time, maybe even money into making a change, then that's the rocket fuel that will keep them going. And intrinsic motivation is far more powerful than anything extrinsic or superficial.
Totally. Yes. I think, you know, asking why is key, isn't it? I think fundamentally we all have to understand a little bit about that ourselves. But again, as clinicians coming at it, so from my perspective and you know, from coaches and you know, from your perspective, I think working with patients or clients, it's the same. We need to be able to understand the journey that they are going on, where they're coming from, and what they're looking or ultimately aspiring to. So I think, in the interest of time, we'll maybe just wrap up. But I'd like to get a takeaway from you. So I think one takeaway that I've gotten from you, and I think it is something I'm looking to incorporate more, is probably that final piece about the modeling, and I think something that's probably more relatable, apart from say celebrities and famous people, is there someone very close that actually that person could speak to? And I think that's a bit like a mentor in some ways, right? Typically, because actually people are more likely to continue, whether that's positive, you know, positive behaviors, if they have access to someone they can speak to, that they can relate to. Almost like an accountability coach, for want of a better word. So I think I think that kind of setup works well, and we see that where you get communities together, you know, with a shared goal, losing weight or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I think that can work with patient support groups and certain patient populations. Again, there's certain things where there's stigma and people don't like to talk about it. So, and I think it's interesting to see where tech and AI and can work there, where it allows people sort of an anonymous, safe space. Obviously, we're talking about sort of regulated tools and providers, of course. Any sort of key final takeaways yourself, Johnny?
Well, I kind of lean in on that. So this year, I had a milestone achieved in April this year. So I have so for the past almost 2 years prior to that, I started my training as a health and wellness coach, and in April this year, I got board certified as a health and wellness coach. And there's
congratulations.
At this point there's only 20 of board certified HWCs in the UK, and I was first in Northern Ireland to achieve it. So very intense training course, and the most rigorous exam that I've ever had to sit, including my PhD Viva in that as well. It was incredibly challenging. So hugely proud of that achievement. What I would love to see in the next 10 years, and I think the NHS 10-year plan is really echoes this, is everyone has access to a GP in the country, but I would love to see health coaching evolve to being a mainstream service within every primary care setting, so that health coaching, whether it's done as private one-to-ones or in groups, like homogeneous groups where, you know, everybody has the same challenge perhaps, but it's helping people achieve successful long-term behavior change, and it's going to be incredibly helpful to the medical system and to the GPs. So the GPs might diagnose a treatment plan, the health coach supports the successful implementation of that treatment plan, plus supporting behaviors to surround it, such as in the pillars of lifestyle medicine, and helping more people move more, sit less, sleep better, eat better, etc. So I love how the NHS have really put a massive effort into deconditioning us from being reactive patients, and probably if you're honest, reactive practitioners as well, to being much more preventative and proactive in our approach to healthcare and health promotion and health prevention. So I would love us to live in a society where that is the norm, and not only do you go to your primary care surgery for your GP support, but your health coach lives there too, and and you get kind of that, suppose, that psychological support around helping you change behaviors and cope better with shifts in your lifestyle, which makes such a massive difference to society and to human health as we all progress on, and we push our lifespans further, we'll push our health spans further, and we'll have more quality years, as we were talking earlier on.
Totally. Johnny, I echo that. I feel like that is definitely something that we're going to see a lot more of. And as you've just said, I'd just like to see that shift really go further, right? Yeah. I mean, it's sort of happening there, and I think we will see more and more of that in 2026 and beyond. But I think seeing a real shift to a proactive, preventative first model, and obviously the downstream positive impacts from that, and that becomes the norm rather than the kind of, oh, okay, this is what we need to focus on and do more of. Will obviously be excellent. But I've really enjoyed this discussion. A lot of it for me to now go away, reflect on in the last few days of 2025, and put into practice in a personal capacity, but I think also at TED's Health, in the NHS, and elsewhere where I work. So to support other individuals, our workforce, clinicians and practitioners, but also ultimately the people we serve, patients and clients. So it's been really great having a discussion. I look forward to hopefully more conversations like this with yourself, but obviously some fallout conversations with anyone who's listening. From my perspective, you're very welcome to reach out to us. You can reach out either on LinkedIn to me or Johnny, I'm sure, or you can email me directly at TED's Health. It'll be jonathan.andrews@tedshealth.com. If people are interested to further discussion or engage you, Johnny, how best can they reach you?
As you mentioned, LinkedIn's a great way of finding me, Dr. Johnny Bloomfield, and I have a Healthy Habits newsletter there that you'd be welcome to sign up to. I have a website, johnnybloomfield.com, so JONNY Bloomfield.com, and you can reach out and book a discovery call with me if you want to explore any way I can potentially help you at all into 2026.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much, Johnny. I think that's bye from me.
And bye from me is back to the two Ronnies.
Absolutely, yeah. What a way to end, eh? Well, yeah. Wishing everyone hopefully a festive Christmas break, New Year, and hopefully a healthy and prosperous 2026.
Absolutely. Thanks. It's been a pleasure being on today with you.
Take care. Okay. I will